The 1972 Olympic basketball gold medal game in Munich featured the most controversial ending in the history of the sport. It marked the first time since basketball was introduced as an Olympic sport that the United States did not win the gold medal. The game's ending featured mass confusion, resulting in three separate chances for the Russians to score what proved to be the winning basket. The American team, and America as a whole, was rightly outraged by the proceedings. To this day, no member of that 1972 Olympic team has accepted the silver medals that were to be presented to them following the game. In early December 2022, a little more than 50 years after the event, I talked with team captain Kenneth Davis about the events surrounding the controversial ending and his role as captain of the team.
This Kenny.
Hey, Kenny, this is Mike Lee from Saturday Sportsline Memories. Thanks for taking the time to talk. I've already done the introduction here for the listeners, and so I'll just get right into it without setting up everything. You were from Georgetown College, an NAIA school in Kentucky. How were you selected to be on the 1972 team, Kenny?
They brought representatives from the NCAA, NAIA, junior college, and AAU players, and took 67 of us out to Colorado Springs in Colorado at the Air Force Academy. And then we had tryouts for 2 weeks. And after that 2 weeks was over, I was fortunate enough, to be very honest with you, to make the team.
What did you know about the Russian team going into the Olympic competition?
Well, I knew they were very good. I played on the World University team in 1970, and they beat us at the finals of that game. So obviously I was aware of how good they were. That particular team that we played in Munich, average age was 28 and probably played 300 games together. Our average age was about 19, and we played 10 games together. So I think that made a difference. You could have more talent, but if you play more together, it probably makes you a better team. And I think maybe that was one of the reasons that Russian team was really that good.
Yeah, they were older, and I believe you were the oldest member of that team and selected captain, if I'm not mistaken. What was the process there, Kenny?
Coach Iva asked the players to choose someone to represent us as the captain of the team, and my teammates chose me. I think maybe a couple of reasons. As you mentioned, I was the oldest player on the team, and also I had the most experience as an international player, and also there were some places and events that the captain needed to go to, and maybe some of my players weren't excited about doing that, so they thought maybe that I should. So there's probably a combination of things that happened that ended up making me the captain.
Well, the Russian team, as you mentioned, was awfully good, and so you had to practice really hard and get ready for them. There weren't, to me, and I'm in my mid-60s, there weren't, to me, looking back, a lot of memorable names on that team. Doug Collins and Bobby Jones, I think, are the most significant. But they had to work hard to get their place on the team, as you mentioned. Swen Nader, I had read, of national champion UCLA, tried out but quit. The practices were quite grueling, as I understand it.
Well, Coach Iva had coached in the Olympics before, and obviously he knew what to expect. And he felt like that obviously the main competition we would have would be against Russia, and he always kept stressing that to us, that that would probably be the gold medal game if we continued to win as we should have, and obviously that was the case. Swen Nader probably was the best player on our team, and it was devastating, I think, to all of us when he decided to quit. And when he did that, Tom McMillan came in, and of course Tom was extremely talented as well, but at the tryouts, Swen Nader had the best statistics of any player that was out there.
Talk a little bit about Coach Hank Iba and his philosophy of basketball. I've read, I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but he required 5 passes before a shot being taken. It was a very deliberate style of play.
It was, and I think one of the reasons that he wanted that style of play in the Olympics was he felt like that the foreign teams were probably not as good defensively as they were offensively. So he felt like that if you pass the ball enough times that eventually those foreign teams' defense would break down. And I think for the most part that was what happened. And we got off to kind of a slow start against the Russian team and had to pick that thing up. But overall, I think he's gotten some criticism for the way that he coached. But looking back on it, I think that he knew that was probably the best way to coach against those foreign teams.
You know, I remember watching that game in 1972 on ABC television as it happened, and I still do a slow burn to this day, more than 50 years later, watching that and thinking back on it. Do you still do kind of a slow burn yourself, Kenny, thinking on it?
Well, obviously, a lot of things happen occasionally that brings it back to our memory. One of the things that I've talked about often is I think we got cheated from standing on that platform and hearing the national anthem being played. And it seems like that when I go to a game now and they play the national anthem, that always comes back to my memory. Um, it was difficult, obviously, as to what happened. According to the rules, I think we won that game. But trying to put that all in perspective, what happened to those Israeli kids has always been foremost in my mind. We came back home. Everybody had a career. Everybody had a nice family. Most lived several years. Obviously, we lost 2 players recently, but those athletes from Israel were our age and lived in the same place, ate in the same cafeteria, and it was catastrophic what happened to them. So each and every time that I get a little discouraged as to what happened to us, I always remember what happened to them, and it puts it in perspective for me.
Yes, it certainly does. Let's go back to the game itself, the final seconds of that game. Uh, there was confusion on the initial inbounds pass, and then there was a second setup and more confusion, and then finally, of course, the third one where the basket was good, and that was the end of the game. What was? Do you remember some of the conversations and feelings, and what was the general gist of, I guess, the what was going on down there, at least on the American sideline?
Well, obviously, when Doug was shooting that second free throw, there was no way possible that the Russians could get a timeout. If he makes it, the ball is having to be brought in bounds by the Russian players, and if they don't do that within 5 seconds, then we get the ball back. If he misses it, obviously it's a live ball. So in either situation, that was what happened. And once Doug made that, the Russians had to bring it in bounds. They played 2 of those seconds. Would have played the third one, I think, if the Russian coach hadn't been out on the playing floor. Referees stopped the game as they should have, but they probably should have given him a technical foul because you can't do that as a coach to be out on that playing floor like he was. But that is a referee's judgment decision, and if he doesn't make it, there's nothing he can do about it. But they stopped the game, got him back to his bench, and now there's 1 second. They bring the ball in, throw a long pass down the floor. It was deflected, goes back out of bounds, the horn sounded, the game's over. Well, what happened was a guy came out of the stands and goes up to the scores table, and he orders them to reset the clock back for 3 more seconds, which obviously is illegal. And we, in the huddle, talked about possibly going straight to the dressing room, and we were told that if we did that, then we would forfeit. And Coach Iba adamantly said, I'm not going to lose the game that way. So obviously we went back out, and what happened was they scored the last bucket in those last 3 seconds.
Yes, and there wasn't any fourth attempt to, of course, rectify the situation. Do you think Kenny, the IOC should have declared a no contest looking back on this?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, according to the rules, they should have said what happened was illegal and should not have happened. We based our protest, and 14 hours later, there was a committee of 5 people that looked at the protest. But what happened was the guy that came out of the stands and ordered them to reset the clock was the same guy that picked the people to look at the protest. And honestly, 3 of those were from communist countries, 2 were from free countries, and the verdict was 3-2. So the guy that did what he did almost seems like that he was strong enough, had the most power, had enough power to make sure that what he did, he could back it up. And I think that's what happened.
Who was that gentleman who came out of the stands? I have not been clear on that.
His name was Mike Jones, and his nationality was from Great Britain. But along the way, he had made a statement that he felt like that it was a detriment to the progress of international basketball if the Americans kept winning, especially the Olympics. So it almost seemed like that he saw an opportunity to maybe change that, and he reacted to that. Whether he did that based on his feelings or whether he thought actually the Russian players should have gotten 3 more seconds is something that I don't think has ever been determined or established, especially by him. He never ever came out and said that.
Did you or any of your teammates on that 72 team, Kenny, have an opportunity to talk to your Russian opponents in the years following that game to get their views on how they think the game went?
No, that never happened. But I'll be honest with you, they knew exactly according to international rules. I believe that they didn't win that game legitimately. Obviously, that was something they couldn't publicly state, but they had to know that the rules are violated, and they did not win the game legitimately. I've often been asked, what if it had been reversed and it happened to us the same way? My response was, I hope we'd had enough courage to recognize that we lost that game according to the rules. But I think those Russian players who played international basketball under those rules their whole life realized that they did not win it legitimately.
Well, in the years since the 1972 Olympic game, I've read a little bit about what you did. You sold, or maybe you still do selling for Converse. You have a cattle ranch down in Kentucky, and are you still working for Converse, or are you pretty much retired at this point?
I am retired. I worked 40 years and 5 months for them, and my last paycheck was in March of 2013. So this coming March will be my 10th year away from working with them.
Well, I can state it personally. It feels pretty good being retired. So, um,
It is. Obviously, I have my farm here, and that kind of keeps me busy. But it was a perfect job for me being on Converse's basketball staff, and I was fortunate that he hired me, and I went to work with him 2 weeks after I got back from Munich.
and looking back on the 1972 team, what 50 years later would you like people to remember about the U.S. Olympic basketball team, Kenny?
I think it's pretty simple. According to the rules that game was played under, we won and Russia lost. And hopefully somewhere along the line that will maybe be brought out. But to be honest with you, Mike, after 50 years, I'm sure that that won't happen. One of the things that upset us a little bit, too, is the American Olympic organization really didn't support us as well. And so it's a long situation what happened. It's difficult to get politics almost out of anything, and obviously I think that's what happened then. But we'll go to our grave knowing that according to the rules we won the game. So if we never ever get anything that symbolizes that, or if we never ever get that recognition, that'll still be okay.
And I guess those silver medals are still entombed in a safe in Switzerland.
Well, that's kind of up in the air as well. There was a gentleman that wrote a book about our team out of Chicago a few years back, and he wanted to go over and photograph them. and was told that that was not something that could happen. We've heard over the years that there's no way there's 12 of those silver medals out there in one place. We've heard that for a while the Germans kept them in a drawer, and then somebody gave one to a friend or whatever. But it doesn't matter, because I don't think at any moment in time that any of our teammates or families of our teammates will ever accept it. So it'll be interesting about that. We've been told that if one guy took it, it'd be pretty valuable. But again, that's something that I don't think will ever happen. At least I hope it won't anyway.
Well, Kenny, thank you very much for your time. God bless you. Have a great holiday season. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, and enjoyed visiting with you as well. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.